And he calls me from Texas, and he says, Joe, I'm 76, I'm retired. Have you seen my website? I said, no. I said, can I send it to you? Yes. And you know what the title of his website is? USA Ponzi. He's calling the entire United States of America a Ponzi scheme. And this guy has a master's degree in math and physics. He's not an accountant, but he's on the board right now of about a dozen companies, and he was the chief information officer for many. So he's a smart guy, 76, and he says, you know, I can't leave my kids this country. We've got counterfeit money. We have $100 trillion in debt, he says. He says it's the 18 plus another 82. That's the way he figures it. $100 trillion. And you know what that is? He calls it counterfeit money. We created it from nothing. We created a lot of this borrowing by printing money. And we're monetizing this debt right now by issuing more treasury bills. Why? Because the world is in worse shape than we are. You might say, well, how do we get away with this? Because people still want to buy our treasury bills, even though they're not even paying an interest. In fact, I just saw an article by the former OMB director under Reagan. You remember Dan, what was his name? Stockman, right? Stockman left Reagan because Reagan refused to deal with the deficits the way Stockman thought they should have been dealt with. And in those days, we didn't have deficits like now. And here's an article from Stockman right here. This is nuts. $5.3 trillion of government bonds now have negative yields. How do you like that? This was just written April 21st, 2015. So what's happening, though, is people are so insecure around the world, they'd rather buy a U.S. Treasury bill that pays them no interest, or maybe they have to even pay to get that bill because they're more afraid of protecting their capital than they are of getting income. Well, but that's hurting those older people, like you just said. So we got a lot of thinking to do here, but listen, the bottom line is we don't have the leadership we need in Washington. We don't have a president that understands this. You just said, let's project 10 years. If you took the cash basis numbers that the Congressional Budget Office has and go forward 10 years, and the way they do it is they say, well, if you don't change any laws and all the policies stay the way they are today, we're going from $18.2 trillion in debt in 10 years to $27 trillion. Imagine that. So
Congressman,
no one's attempting to reduce the debt.
Well, Congressman, what bothers me, too, is the American people don't know a lot of the details. I just want to use the one example of China. China had a lot of our short-term debt. They traded about a year and a half ago for some longer-term instruments. That allowed them to actually, in the long run, collect more money from the U.S. government, and we were happy to be able to turn over our debt. So
right.
This is something, it's a technicality, the type of debt instrument they had.
Right.
The American public wasn't really paying attention to it, but it really cost us. The types of things you're talking about are relatively technical. Do you think that we can ever get the average American voter to pay attention to this type of information?
We're going to have to. If we don't, I don't see how we're going to survive as a sustainable economic financial entity. And that's the key word today, sustainability. Europe is in trouble. We know that. Their GDP is down. And they put in austerity measures that are not working. Now, where they're going, I don't know. But I'm telling you that based on where the rest of the world is, we are still the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry. And that's why we're getting people to come here to buy treasury bills when they're making no money. Now, you're right. China is not stupid. They figured, why do we have to settle for, since they owe us the money and they need more, let's roll over this debt and let's get higher interest rates on 10-year treasury bills as opposed to no interest or very low interest on 1 or 2 year treasury bills. And they did that. So, but it was in our interest, too, because we have gotten most of our debt, that $18 trillion, it's on a short-term term. It's a short term. So it's going to roll over in short term anyway, so they probably took a big chunk and said, let's get this off our backs right now, even though we pay more interest. Again, very short-sighted. It's not
okay, Joe,
the future.
We've established the crisis, and you have looked at this both as an elected official and as the author of one of the most brilliant books on the federal government I've ever read, Unaccountable Congress, and you're a CPA. How do we attack the problem?
Okay. when I was in Congress, I brought a vision with me that I brought from the accounting profession, my old firm, Arthur Anderson. It was called Chief Financial Officers. We realized when I was in Arthur Anderson, when we did the bailout of New York City, and then we started looking at the preparation of a prototype type statement for the United States of America for the annual statements, that they had a lot of auditors, bookkeepers, accountants, but they didn't have people who understood how to work with numbers. Those are called chief financial officers. Every major corporation has one. Well, now my bill got passed in 1990 after I left Congress, but they dumbed it down. Rather than making the chief financial officer, the big one at the top, an independent entity, they put it 3 levels down in OMB. That's like putting the fox in the chicken coop. Now, that was wrong. Number 2, the bill that I introduced in 1987 when I was a congressman out of New Rochelle had the obligation, the mandatory accounting should have been or should be generally accepted accounting principles, otherwise known as accrual accounting. That means full liability accounting. Put all of our debt on the books where people could see it. Certainly we want to put our assets on the books too, and they do, but it's much easier to put assets since they are minuscule compared to the debt that we have as a nation when you look at the unfunded liabilities. So what we need now, 25 years later, and I just wrote the article, the CFO Act 25 years later by Joe Diaguardi, I'm now saying let's go back to what I said in 1987. We need to get a real chief financial officer and put it in the independent office, maybe the executive office of the president, something like the Fed, in a sense, but not creating a new Fed. Maybe a better example would be the Comptroller General, the head of the GAO, Government Accountability Office, who has a 15-year term, by the way. People probably don't know that. He cannot be fired, only impeached. We got to do that for the chief financial officer because the Comptroller General is in the Congress, is a product of Congress. We need the same kind of check and balance in the executive branch of government, but somebody who cannot be fired. So he can be truly honest and tell the truth about what's really going on, and not even the president could fire him. He only can be impeached by Congress after he's charged, and that's the charge, the impeachment. So the point is, we got to start thinking creatively, but we don't have to invent these things. They already exist in the private sector, and that's why the private sector is in pretty good shape.
Joe, where can people find that on the web?
Well, they have to go to www.truthingovernment.org. That's the foundation. Truth, spell out truth in government, TRUTHIN government.org. And by the way, as soon as you open that up, guess what you're going to see? A 2.5-minute whiteboard animation, and there's a little cartoon. You see little Johnny and Mary, and it tells you in very nice graphic terms and with some fast writing letters what we're doing to the next generation. And the bottom line, Frank, is fairness. Why aren't we being fair to the next generation like our fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and were fair to us? That's the name of the game.
Joe, before you came on the air, we were talking a bit about the future, just what you're saying to some extent, the future of the middle class in the country. Do you see that unless there is some very substantial change, that the middle class really doesn't have much of a future? There will be a very wealthy and a very poor society rather than a middle class society the way we've been pretty much throughout the 20th century.
Absolutely. Unless we get now a major tax reform bill to reorganize the tax code so that the $1.8 trillion in deductions, so-called loopholes, are now reconsidered. Not that you eliminate them all, because we don't want to hurt charitable contributions and real estate values by eliminating interest, but we got so many other things in there. I'll bet you half of them could be taken back and then reallocated in a way that creates growth. So you need tax reform, number one. 2, you need budget reform, but a budget reform bill that's going to stick. We passed one called Pay-As-You-Go, in other words, pay-go, and now what we just did, and you've seen it in the last couple of weeks, we took some very expensive things and said we got to do these, but they didn't pay for them in any way. They didn't raise taxes. They didn't eliminate expenses from other categories. What they're going to have to do now is just borrow to pay for them. That is wrong. That's why the debt's going from $18.2 trillion as we speak this month to, in 10 years, $27 trillion.
Before we go, how do you stand on concepts like flat tax and fair tax?
Okay. Listen, if we're going to change the taxes, we got to change them totally. You can't have multiple tax systems. The people that talk about a VAT tax or a fair tax or a flat tax think that this could be an additional way that we can do things because the income tax is not working. But I don't see anybody saying let's get rid of the income tax totally. We got to take a whole new brush to taxation so that we create infrastructure that works, that then helps get us jobs that work. When I was a tax partner at Arthur Anderson, there was something called the investment tax credit. It came in 1962. It worked very well. People who bought equipment, people who bought things that were in manufacturing got immediately a 7% credit, not a deduction, off their tax bills. Why aren't we dealing with something like that today? We need manufacturing in America. We are a consumption-based economy, 70%, and we need to create jobs for the middle class, and those jobs are probably going to be mainly manufacturing jobs. So we're not being creative enough with our tax reform, and we're not doing enough on the budget process. And there's one more thing I'm going to tell you. We got to change the election system. We're not getting the people we need. We are now down to 50 seats out of 435 in the House of Representatives that are competitive because we've had redistricting by the politicians, not by independent people. That's number one. Number two, money is poisoning the whole process. So people can buy what they want. The poor and the middle class don't have that kind of money. And that's one of the big problems. We got to go back to Citizens United and say that is not free speech. That's negative advertising. And it's the kind of money that is just inducing people to do the wrong thing for America. It's helping certain parts of America or certain special interest groups, but not the American people. We got a lot to do. We got to change the election system, the tax system, the budget process, and maybe then we'll have the beginning of an America that will survive another 236 years.
Well said, Congressman. Once again, the website, www.truthingovernment.org. Joe, it's been too long since we've spoken. It's been great hearing from you. But you know my rule about TV. If you're going to show up for an in-person interview, you have to bring your lovely daughter with you.
Then we got to go find her in Maine someplace. She moved from Hollywood to Maine. But maybe I can get her to come on Skype.
Sounds good. Congressman Joe Giaguardi, thank you so much for being on the Vernuccio Novak Report.
Have me back.
I definitely will.
Okay, bye.
This has been the Vernuccio Novak Report. We are broadcast worldwide on the AM/FM 247.com network and also on radio in Las Vegas, Nevada, 1520 AM and 107.1 FM, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 1640 AM and 102.1 FM, Tampa, Florida, 1630 AM, 102.1 FM, Macon, Georgia, 810 AM and 98.3 FM, and Boulder, Colorado, 100.7 FM. Thanks for listening and join us again next week. We are sponsored by the New York Analysis of Policy and Government at usagovpolicy.com and the Institute for American Politics. Email us at truthinradio@gmail.com and tune into the American Political Zone television show, also on the AM/FM 247.com network. We welcome our new audience on the great WNJC on 1360 AM in Philadelphia and southern New Jersey, and the Renew America Network.
Our producer is the amazing Abigail White, and our director is the brilliant Jeff Hansen.